The real reason you're still not healing is not because you are weak. It is not because you are weak. It is not because you lack discipline. It is not because you didn't try hard enough, or believe strongly enough. The real reason you're still not healing is something far more misunderstood, far more invisible, and far more compassionate than you've been led to believe. It is trauma. Trauma is not the event itself. Two people can go through the same experience and walk away with very different internal realities. The event may be identical, but the meaning, the interpretation, and the emotional isolation surrounding it determine whether it becomes traumatic. Trauma is not what happens to you. It is what happens inside you when you feel overwhelmed and alone. For a child especially, trauma does not require violence. It can emerge from subtle, repeated moments of emotional disconnection. A parent who is physically present but emotionally unavailable. A caregiver who is stressed, depressed, or distracted. A household where love feels conditional. A classroom where sensitivity is mocked. The child does not have the capacity to say, "My environment is limited." Instead, the child concludes, "There must be something wrong with me." That internal conclusion becomes the wound. When a child feels unseen, unheard, or unsafe, the nervous system adapts. The body tightens, the mind becomes hypervigilant, the heart learns to scan for danger. This is not weakness, it is brilliance. It is the intelligence of survival. But in order to survive, the child may suppress anger, silence, sadness, mute needs, and disconnect from authenticity. That disconnection is trauma. Over time, the wound is no longer visible as an event. It shows up as patterns. You may struggle to set boundaries. You may overachieve to feel worthy. You may avoid intimacy because vulnerability feels unsafe. You may feel chronic anxiety without knowing why. These are not personality flaws. They are echoes of adaptations made long ago. The tragedy is that society often treats these adaptations as disorders, rather than understanding them as protective responses. Instead of asking what pain shaped this behavior, we ask, how do we eliminate this behavior? Instead of honoring the intelligence of the survival response, we try to suppress it. This deepens the internal conflict. The body does not forget what the mind minimizes. Even if you cannot recall specific moments, your nervous system carries the imprint. The tightening in your chest, the racing thoughts, the exhaustion after social interactions, the inability to relax, these are not random malfunctions. They are signals. They are communications from a part of you that once had to stay alert to stay safe. When you recognize that trauma is the wound, not the event, something shifts. You stop comparing your pain to others. You stop saying, "It wasn't that bad." You stop dismissing your own experience. You begin to see that what matters is not how dramatic the story appears from the outside, but how alone you felt on the inside. Your coping mechanisms were not mistakes. They were intelligent adaptations shaped in moments when you did not have the power, language, or support to protect yourself in any other way. When we look at behaviors such as people-pleasing, perfectionism, emotional withdrawal, anger, addiction, overworking, or even chronic self-criticism, we are often taught to see them as flaws. But if we look deeper, with curiosity instead of judgment, we begin to see something else. We begin to see protection. Every human being is wired for attachment. As children, our survival depends on maintaining connection with our caregivers. If that connection feels threatened, the nervous system will do whatever it must to preserve it. A child who senses that expressing anger leads to rejection may learn to suppress anger entirely. A child who experiences unpredictability may become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for shifts in mood. A child who feels unseen may become exceptional, high-achieving, endlessly helpful, hoping that usefulness will guarantee belonging. These are not random traits. They are survival strategies. Over time, these strategies solidify into identity. The quiet one, the responsible one, the strong one, the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel. Each identity carries a story of adaptation. Beneath each is a younger self who once faced an emotional environment that felt overwhelming. That younger self did not have the luxury of processing pain. It had the necessity of surviving it. Consider addiction, for example. Instead of asking why someone would repeatedly choose something harmful, we might ask what unbearable feeling that substance or behavior is attempting to soothe. The relief may be temporary, but the need beneath it is real. Addiction is often an attempt to regulate a nervous system that has been chronically dysregulated. It is a way to numb anxiety, quiet shame, dampen loneliness, or escape intrusive memories. When we frame it this way, we see that the addiction is not the primary problem. It is an attempt at a solution. The same is true for perfectionism. On the surface, it appears as ambition or high standards. Underneath, it is often fear. Fear of being exposed as inadequate. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of losing love. Perfectionism says, if I do everything right, I will finally be safe. But safety achieved through performance is fragile. It requires constant effort. It never truly settles the nervous system because it is built on conditional worth. Emotional withdrawal is another adaptation frequently misunderstood. When closeness once led to hurt, the body learns to associate vulnerability with danger. So it builds walls, it numbs feelings, it keeps conversation surface level. From the outside, this may look like indifference. Inside, it is often self-protection. The system has learned that connection is risky. Even anger can be protective. For some, anger is the only emotion that feels strong enough to push back against a world that once felt overpowering. Beneath the anger may lie grief, fear, or deep hurt, but those emotions may have once felt too dangerous to express. So anger became the shield. The tragedy is not that these coping mechanisms developed. The tragedy is that they are later shamed. When a coping mechanism is criticized without understanding its origin, the individual experiences a second wound. First, the original pain, then the judgment of the adaptation that helped them survive it. This compounds shame and deepens disconnection from self. Healing begins when we recognize that every coping strategy once had a purpose. It kept you connected. It kept you safe. It kept you functioning in an environment that may not have supported your authentic expression. Without those strategies, you might not have endured what you did. There is wisdom in the way your system protected you, but what protects in one season can imprison in another. The people-pleasing that secured attachment in childhood may now prevent honest relationships in adulthood. The hypervigilance that once anticipated danger may now create chronic anxiety even in safe environments. The emotional numbing that shielded you from pain may now block joy. The coping strategy continues long after the original threat has passed because the nervous system does not automatically update itself. This is why force rarely works in healing. You cannot shame a coping mechanism into disappearing. You cannot bully yourself into safety. If a behavior is rooted in protection, then attempting to eliminate it without offering the nervous system an alternative form of safety will only increase internal tension. The system will cling more tightly to what it knows. Instead, healing invites curiosity. When a pattern emerges, rather than asking, "Why am I like this?" you might ask, "When did I first need this?" Instead of condemning the behavior, you explore the story beneath it. You gently trace it back to the moment when it became necessary. In doing so, you reconnect with the younger self who created it. And as you begin to see your coping mechanisms as expressions of intelligence rather than defects, shame begins to loosen its grip. Compassion grows. The system softens. Because beneath every coping strategy is a human being who did the best they could with the resources they had at the time. Healing begins with compassion, not correction. Many of us approach ourselves as problems to be solved. We notice anxiety and try to eliminate it. We notice anger and attempt to suppress it. We notice unhealthy patterns and immediately search for strategies to fix them. This approach seems logical. After all, if something is causing suffering, shouldn't we try to get rid of it? But when the suffering is rooted in trauma, correction without compassion can become another form of internal violence. From early on, many people learn that certain emotions are unacceptable. Anger may be labeled disrespectful. Sadness may be called weakness. Fear may be dismissed as irrational. In order to preserve attachment, the child internalizes these messages. A split begins to form between what is felt and what is allowed. Over time, that split becomes self-judgment. We begin to police our own inner world. We say to ourselves, "I shouldn't feel this way." Or, "What's wrong with me?" Correction operates from the assumption that something inside you is defective. Compassion operates from the understanding that every reaction has a history. When you feel overwhelming anxiety, compassion asks, "What is this protecting?" When jealousy arises, compassion asks, "What fear lies beneath this?" When you shut down emotionally, compassion asks, "When did I learn that openness was unsafe?" These questions shift the entire internal dynamic. Instead of battling yourself, you begin to relate to yourself. For many trauma survivors, self-criticism became a survival strategy. If a child grows up in an unpredictable or critical environment, becoming self-critical can create a sense of control by anticipating mistakes and correcting them internally. The child attempts to avoid external rejection. The inner critic, though harsh, may have once served as a protective voice. It said, "If I monitor myself closely enough, I can prevent pain." In adulthood, however, that same voice often perpetuates shame and reinforces the belief that love must be earned. Compassion does not mean excusing harmful behavior or avoiding responsibility. It means understanding the roots of behavior before attempting to change it. If you try to eliminate a coping mechanism without acknowledging why it developed, the nervous system may interpret that effort as another threat. The behavior intensifies. The internal conflict deepens. But when you approach the pattern with curiosity and kindness, something softens. The system begins to feel seen rather than attacked. Consider the difference between saying, "I hate that I'm like this," and saying, "Of course I developed this," and saying, "Of course I developed this response give." In what I experienced, the first statement tightens the body. The second creates space. Healing unfolds in that space. When you validate your own pain, you restore the connection that trauma disrupted. You become the supportive presence that may have been missing earlier in life. Compassion also involves grieving. Many people attempt to rush past grief because it feels overwhelming. They prefer solutions over sorrow, but healing requires acknowledging what was lost. The childhood you didn't have, the safety you deserved, the understanding that was absent. Grief is not self-pity. It is an honest response to unmet needs. When grief is allowed, it integrates experience rather than trapping it in the body. Another aspect of compassion is recognizing the limits of willpower. Trauma responses are not choices made in the moment. They are automatic activations shaped by past experiences. Telling yourself to just relax or just stop overreacting misunderstands how the nervous system works. Regulation is not achieved through force. It is cultivated through repeated experiences of safety. Compassion creates those experiences internally. When you respond to your own distress with gentleness instead of criticism, you send a signal to your body that it is not under attack. Many people fear that compassion will make them complacent. They worry that if they are too kind to themselves, they will never change. But research and lived experience suggest the opposite. Shame immobilizes. Compassion mobilizes. When you feel fundamentally flawed, you hide. When you feel understood, you grow. Change that arises from self-acceptance is more sustainable than change driven by fear. Relationships play a crucial role in reinforcing self-compassion. When someone listens without judgment, when they respond with empathy instead of advice, they model a new way of relating. Over time, this external compassion can be internalized. The inner dialogue begins to shift. The harsh tone softens. The body learns that vulnerability does not automatically lead to rejection. Healing, then, is not a battle to conquer yourself. Healing, then, is not a battle to conquer yourself. It is a gradual reconciliation with parts of you that adapted to survive. It is learning to sit with discomfort without abandoning yourself. It is recognizing that beneath every pattern lies a story, and beneath every story lies a need that once went unmet. When you meet that need now with understanding, rather than correction, the foundation for genuine transformation is laid within the nervous system itself.